mentioned what it might be like, still no comparison to the real thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, what did the freedom actually feel like in real time? I mean, I'll help you out on this. When I'd stand on the outside of turn 9 shooting the picture,
It
you guys,
can be very scary.
yeah, the cars at the end of at the end of the straightaway, the car coming head on at you looked like it wasn't quite sure where it wanted to go. Is that the way it felt in the car?
Well, it's kind of typical that things happen so quick at 190 miles an hour down the back straight to Riverside. So you mind your braking points and I guess hope for the best.
How about let's along those lines, because you're the only CanAm driver we have here. Okay. Now, I interviewed Hurley Haywood a couple of years ago, and Hurley drove the 917, and he said it scared the hell out of him. He said that car just scared him. Okay, now, me or anybody else that was watching him goes, man, that guy's just killing it. And, I mean, let's go to Road Atlanta, okay? The old track, prior to the changes, that track was not for the meek, was it?
No, not by any means, especially the one dip off to the back straight, the big dip before the bridge, was incredible. And for you not to lift, which you have to not lift, that was quite an experience because the car got very light and you had to just sort of land it, so to speak, and hope for the right apex, the right part of the road to get it up to the hill, coming downhill under the bridge. It's pretty incredible that part. I'm glad they did away with it because it was quite an experience.
Okay, let's go to Morton in that hot rod Datsun, one of my favorite cars of all time for me. And John, you ran the Road Atlanta, and I'd be interested in your description of coming down the hill, the last turn going on the front straightaway, when there was a earthen bank there. There was no runoff. It was either on the track or you were in the dirt wall, so to speak.
Well,
what was that like?
Actually, you were into the tire, into a bunch of old worn out tires.
Yeah, but
because I did it. I did it in a low CanAm car. I mean, 5-liter CanAm car. In a Datsun, it was a whole different world. It's not as scary as you'd expect. The best turn on the track, they eliminated the lead up to it. It was the second to the last turn. But now it's kind of a vague, weird turn because you're coming out of the slow turn and slower turn. And it takes all the character out of that little area. But it was probably the scariest track in America in that one little section because of the speed.
Yeah. You never had lift in the GTP car there, did you?
Not there. But Brabham and Chip Robinson both crashed roughly in that area in the GTP car.
Okay, I've got a question here. Al, okay, because you're the Porsche guy. For years, McLaren dominated the CanAm, and nobody had a problem. Porsche shows up, they start dominating, and all of a sudden there's a problem with that. What was your opinion of that? I mean, why was it okay forever for it to be a McLaren show, and then Porsche shows up, and all of a sudden, his mic's not on. Or is it the switch not on? There you go.
Now we go. Okay, so if I understand your question right is, what is my impression when the Porsche showed up?
Yeah, well, you had a different position.
Yeah.
On the outside, I'm just like, what's up with this? I mean, why was it okay that this series was built basically with McLaren? It was a McLaren show, and then Porsche shows up, and it becomes a Porsche show, let's face it. Still trying to figure out how much horsepower those cars have, but anyway. And all of a sudden, now it's a problem. And the regulation basically really hurt the series.
In the final analysis, I agree with you, but at the same token, the McLaren's dominated about 5-6 years, and it is evolution of racing. We decided to come with CanAm, we decided normal aspirated engines, and that wasn't good enough against the big four Chevy engines. And when it came with the turbos, I have to say that certainly we, I would say in the beginning, it was clear that the turbos could definitely compete with the McLarens. And then later on when the 917-30 came, our last car, that was just too much. And that actually killed the CanAm. But officially, what killed the CanAm was when the SCCA decided to reduce the fuel consumption, reduce the fuel tank, fuel capacity. And that killed us because we couldn't compete anymore and decided to stop. It was sad, but at the same token, that's racing.
You got a lot of posters out of it, though, that's for sure. Slightly collectible.
Yeah, I was 3 years in Canada in 71, 72, 73, and I tell you that's really, in memory, best years what I had besides the 962 era, but in English.
Everybody wants to put off that Porsche killed the CanAm. It did not. The gas crisis at the time that you all remember from the early 70s.
You mean the fake crap gas crisis?
did in the CanAm series.
It was.
As Alvin said, it was politically not correct for SCCA not to put fuel consumption regulation in it. And that just started the whole process of adding rules. But the fuel issue, the gas shortage, is what killed the CanAm, not Porsche.
I could give you a 3-hour talk about why we had an energy crisis, okay? It was all politics. I'm in the petrochemical business, okay? I could get all the supplies I wanted as long as I paid cash. I could call, hey, we got a tanker full of this down off the coast. Anyway, we're not here for that, okay? Anyway, we made it through that, and it's unfortunate that was a side thing, but it's true. It didn't look good. It didn't look good. Jim, I had a chance to interview your dad, okay? And of course, I asked the question that everybody asked about the wings, okay? Not your dad. And I mean, he's very strong in what he believed, and that's fine. He said we need to reduce it. Everybody says it's the wings. He said, but it was the tires too, it was the tires. And so there is something to that. They were putting more meat on the cars. And if you narrow up, and I've had this discussion with Rick Mears too, about narrowing up the tire, less adhesion. And it doesn't matter what type of wing you have on the car. So you had discussions with your dad, I'm sure. You had a ringside seat on that. What's your feeling on the whole wing thing? Because some of those wings we saw, that one huge wing with the end plates, I mean, that thing had like zero structure to it. It was amazing. It was all honeycomb sort of structural.
Where do you want me to go with this? So John Surtees said this car is too narrow. It gets up on 2 wheels. And Dad, if he was going through the recovery, unfortunately, of the Luthar accident, and then he was testing that car and had a water line break under him, and so he was back laying on his tummy with burns on his backside. And if he was going, he would have sawed the car in half for Luthar and spread it out 6 inches wider so it wouldn't, like a go-kart, get up on 2 wheels. But he said, well, let's just put a big wing on it. And he didn't like that either, so he bought him a McLaren, which was also a thing to do. And so that he could finish out that season, and Dad and Don Gates and Mike Bocabella and all those guys were working on the TJ at the time. And they were all excited about a different way to bring the car connected to the ground. And of course, as downforce increased, to handle that, every month there would be wider tires from Goodyear and Firestone and wider wheels. And you guys know the wheel story that GM came up with this honeycomb wheel that PBS later copied. But each month the tires would get wider and wider. So you have to decide, do we want the cars to go faster and faster with more downforce and more tire, or the tracks weren't designed for the cars to go faster and faster. So there's a lot to the story. My dad was way about how to make the cars go faster. That was the most important to him. For Hampshire, for Phil, finishing was important. So they got last iteration car, and Phil Hill finished more. Dad tested the new idea of the day, and having their own factory at the track at Rattlesnake, their own racetrack they could go test year-round was really, really special. So I'm happy to answer more questions.
No, that's good.
But that gives you an idea. So.
Well, it gives us an idea of the evolution, what happened at the time. Because wings had been around. Obviously, the Chaparrals weren't the first wing cars. You can go back a Swiss car and yada, yada, yada. There's other ones. We know that. So, yeah, it's interesting. Trevor, everybody wants to know about the knee-high car. Okay? And I think a good question is, what was good? Everybody knows the knee-high car, right? The Shadow? What was good about that car, and what was bad about that car?
How many days do we have to discuss this? There were a lot of good things about that car, and there were a lot of very bad things about that car. And the most unfortunate thing is I was the designer of the whole car, beginning to end. So the original car, the original concept, I came up with in the middle of 1968. I was looking at very small cars. I was looking at what direction did I think CanAm cars ought to be going in, and what did I think the direction might be that I'd like to go in. And I thought I'd like to do a smaller car, a markedly smaller car. The picture you showed up there on the screen didn't give any feeling to me that it was a smaller than normal car. What you have to realize is that the bodywork above the front tires the front tire diameter was 16 inches, and the rear tire diameter was basically 18 inches, courtesy of Firestone Tire and Rubber Company agreeing with myself and Don Nichols in late '68. They agreed to build a tire that fit no other car but the car that we had proposed to build. So that started the whole project. And the object was to build an extremely small car, not only a narrower car, but a lower car. And unfortunately, my original design, I was trying to get away with a car that had no wing on it. And development of the car during '69 proved that I kept searching for more downforce at the rear, did lots of spoilering on the car, and et cetera, and it clearly needed a wing on it. So the car didn't race in '69, and by 1970, we were running out of money. We didn't have a sponsor behind it, although Firestone had built the tires, and they sponsored the tires, and they had no idea how much trouble it would be to build a tire as small diameter. The rear tires were basically 18 inches wide and 18 inches in diameter. They were fundamentally almost a square tire with a huge amount of tread on the road. But the original tires had to be running over 50 PSI just to get them flat on the ground, because it was a nightmare to some extent for Firestone to get the tire shape right, much less anything else. Anyway, so as the car developed, by 1970 it was totally apparent to me that I could not get enough downforce in the rear to properly aerodynamically balance the car. So I put a wing on it, and that totally changed. That made the car so much better and allowed me to properly balance it. And I personally cut off the complete rear end of the car. The radiators, unfortunately, in the original design, which was a big mistake, to put the radiators behind the rear wheels, and it was very hard to get the cooling proper on the car. So as the car...
It was just one thing after another.
It was one thing after another. It was a huge development project with way too few people. We had basically, by 1970, we were running out of money, and we were lucky to make a race with the car with a wing on it.
So you worked for Don Nichols. Pete Lyons wrote the book on Shadow on Don Nichols. I'd like Pete to give us an impression. Don Nichols is always rumored that he worked for the CIA. And the other mystery, how much horsepower did the Porsche have, and did Don Nichols work for the CIA? Was he a hired hitman, or I heard so many stories. So Pete, tell us, when you went up to meet with Nichols, he had a barn. The other mystery, how much horsepower did the Porsche have, and did Don Nichols work for the CIA? Was he a hired hitman, or I heard so many stories. So Pete, tell us, when you went up to meet with Nichols, he had a barn up there in the farm country, on the backside of the hill from Laguna Seca there. He was sort of like hidden in plain sight, so to speak. What was it like talking with Don? Yeah, get closer to the mic. We can't hear you. Turn his volume up. Yeah, just leave the switch on when you hand it from person to person. Here, you do big one. Okay. Yeah, turn his volume up a little bit.
Turn his volume up a little bit. Well, how's everybody enjoying this so far? No, I put the question to Don Nichols, what about these stories that you worked for the CIA and you were a spy and all that? And all he would do was smile. He says, well, I don't think that's appropriate to talk about. What we did know, that he was working with the U.S. Army in counterintelligence, particularly in Japan, after the Korean War era. He was in Korea during that war, but then later on he spent some time, several years in Japan. And he was telling me that he did, in fact, run operations to basically get in the head of the Russians, who were also trying to take over Japan at the time. He would send out what he called my goon squad, and they would do things like put nails in generals' tires as they were waiting outside a restaurant. They'd come out there, all the tires would be flat. I mean, it wasn't. Those are the things he told me about. And he did start at one point. He says that was one time in whatever city it was. He said, "No, I better not tell you about that." I think Don loved the idea that people thought he was a spy, and by keeping his mouth shut about it, just smiling mysteriously, all it did was emphasize that there must be something to this story, and so he became amused at this story. And I don't honestly think he was anything like a spy.
Okay, so let's transition from that to your absolute favorite CanAm race.
Well, as has been said before, we don't have enough time.
Well, I mean, one race though, one race. There's got to be one that stands out. Like you said, the only time it rained, I was at Laguna Seca, 72 it rained, didn't it? Or
The rain at Laguna Seca was 1968, that's when John Cannon won.
okay, that was
But we
when it
had
was
rain
practices rained.
We also had rain at Mid-Ohio when George Fulmer drove the Porsche 917. He had like 900 or 1,000 horsepower, perhaps Alvin knows more than I do. And he stayed on slick tires through the race because Penske wouldn't let him come in to change tires. And the car was slipping and sliding, and you could hear the wheels spin up, like that, and he'd twitch it. But he never, I can't say he never spun. I didn't see the whole track. But the point is, he won the race under incredible conditions. And it was only the second time he'd ever driven this ungodly powerful, very tricky, hard to drive car. And so George Fulmer is one of the real superstars of driving, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, well, the first time he drove the 917 was at Road Atlanta.
Yes.
He had never tested the car.
That's right.
Had never driven on the track.
Right.
Put it on the pole and won the race, didn't he?
He said he got a call from Penske that Mark Dunny, who had been injured in a crash testing for that race. And so Roger tracked him down in a motel somewhere and told him he had to be in Atlanta on such a date and drive his car. And George had a history with Penske. He'd driven for Penske quite a lot in years previously, so he was a natural choice. And so Roger brought him there, and Mark was there on crutches, and he showed him the track. As you're right, he had never seen the track before. And he's got this ungodly powerful car, which is very hard to drive because of the turbo lag. And and Alvin, pardon me, but it didn't handle very well. And George says, I had two instructions. I am not to crash the car, and I am to win the race.
Well, the Porsche people were there. I mean, Dr. Porsche, I think, was there. And this is the big debut. Is that true? Porsche people were there. I know there was some sort of...
No. Mark, the story is that Mark did debut the car in the first race of the 72 season at Mosport. And then there was about a month delay before the next race in Atlanta, so they were testing at Atlanta when Mark had the accident. That's when George came in.
Yeah.
The car did run at Mosport, and it was very fast. I think it may have been on pole, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I have to check my book.
Unbelievable, though, performance by George on what we've already established to be a daunting track.
Right.
Right. Okay, John Morton. Question from Lothar. He wants you to tell the story of the Denny Hulme start at St. Jovite.
I think it's the one that Lothar had a problem with his, everybody calls him Lothar, but it's Lothar. Marilyn told me that. She's sitting right here. So. And he was in trouble relative to the time the race started. And they were working on the car, and the McLaren team was helping him. Lothar would get, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he'd usually get last year's McLaren as his car. Last year's team car. Anyway, they're trying to get ready. They're not going to make the start time. I imagine that I think the McLarens were first and second, probably Lothar was third. And they're working on the car, and they said, you guys better, I'm not sure verbatim what was done, but Lothar said, you guys got to start the race. It's getting time to start. And Denny Hulme said, they're not going to start the race without us. And they continued to work on Lothar's car till it was in the race. Is that the story? Yeah.
All right, John, I got another one for you here. Be honest now. Because I remember Parnelli told me, he asked Bud Moore, hey, what's going on in the engine? He said, none of your damn business. You drive the car, I'll build the motors. So how much of the Nissan Datsun engine parts were actually in the 510 engine?
The only parts that I know that were not made in Japan, and probably pieces of them were the pistons were Arius pistons, and the cams were Eskandarian cams. Other than that, they were all Datsun parts.
Look at that, in Iskandari. All right, God bless him. Just passed away in 104.
That was valve springs. The valve springs weren't, because they were racing valve springs. But almost all the parts were actually Datsun parts.
Okay, give us one fun, interesting racing-related story that most people don't know. This has got to be something you didn't write in a book then, I guess. I don't know. I think you pretty much bared it all. Maybe there's something left there. Yeah, well, maybe we go to Sylvia and she'll tell us.
Are you talking to me or Sylvia?
Yeah, you. Yeah. Wait, is Robert De Niro here? Are you talking to me?
The race of all the races I ran in that car, the one race that really pisses me off was at Watkins Glen, and I always had the pole. In this race, I didn't. And Watkins Glen was the only track that had a speed trap. And my car was, Peter Gregg out-qualified me, which was extra insulting. So they looked at the speed traps and I said, this doesn't feel strong enough. And it was down like 10 miles an hour at the end of the speed trap. So after qualifying, Peter Gregg in his kind, sensitive way, he said, well, when you start driving faster cars, you'll get better. He was driving a 917 at the time. So they changed my engine. And in the morning warm-up, I was faster. But in the race, he couldn't get my Queck, and I got my Gregg and Queck and pulled away. And we were not supposed to have to stop that race. And Peter apparently changed his mind, and I had a fairly good lead on Gregg. And I look at my mirror, and he's gone. And I go, well, he broke. So I slowed way driven so slowly that when I made my stop, he got ahead. And I never could pad. He beat me by, 20 feet, 15 feet. No, not that far. And anyway, it bothers me today.
Well, I can't blame you. I mean, Peter wasn't the head of the public relations department. I'll put it that way. Yeah, that's a great story. Lothar.
And I have a little something to say about being
Okay, this is Sylvia, John's wife. Sylvia, welcome. We're not married?
50 plus years. Okay.
I thought you guys got married.
No, that
Really?
changes things.
Well, how about tonight? I got a boutonniere on. And you know what? I am a justice of the peace, so we can make this happen.
Don't ruin my income tax situation, okay?
It's a common law state anyway.
But let me tell my Peter Gregg story. I had an incident with Gregg many years before I knew John and my previous boyfriend, who was a race car driver, and we had rented a PIR racetrack. And we were going to have a whole team coming there together. And Peter Gregg showed up. And he came out with a big pile of money and bought the track out from under us. And it was devastating because we would spend all of our money getting our guys there and everything. So years later, I think it was Watkins Glen, and Peter started talking to me about being an English major and books, and he said, Sylvia, he said, I'm so glad I got a chance to talk to you. He said, because I thought after what happened at the hour that you didn't like me. And I said, Peter, what makes you think I have to like you to talk to you? That was my best moment.
Who can tell us what drivers' meetings were like with Oscar Kovalevsky? Any of us that know Oscar, he was one of a kind. He was a great guy. He brought the party. He did all the stunts. He was the Joker. Lothar, you got anything about the drivers' meeting with Oscar? Mr. Auto World slot car guy?
Yeah, he organized quite a few scooter or what you call them,
Mini bikes?
no, in the pits, work on the cardio or creeper.
Oh, Creeper.
Creepers.
Yeah.
Creepers, Oscar would organize those, and it was,
Creeper racing.
and he would mount a wing on top of his helmet.
Yeah, he did. He put a wing on his helmet. Has everybody seen that picture? Pretty well known. Yeah.
He also would mount a wing on a turtle and let it go. So he came up with some real funny stuff.
Yeah, he was a great guy. Mr. Enthusiasm, man, I tell you what, if he was selling something and he got a hold of you, you either bought or you were with him for 2 hours. Okay.
Lothar, what was your favorite McLaren?
Oh, that's a good question.
Well, it was the one that I bought from Bruce, the original MAA, which turned into MAB. That was the first year we had to remove the high wing, and of course everybody mounted the low wing, and unfortunately I lost that car due to a broken axle in Elkhart Lake, but it definitely was my favorite car. Easiest to drive, and it definitely felt good. So.
All right. Here's a question. I don't know who we're going to ask this of. This could be anybody and everybody. What was the most important design evolution that came out of the CanAm period?
That's an easy one.
This gentleman right here.
Unlimited possibilities.
Very good. They're bringing you a mic there.
Yeah, unlimited possibilities. And I want to plagiarize someone that I'm not good enough to plagiarize. Pete Lyons. And he made a statement in one of his books about crawling into the breach of a battleship rifle and pulling your own leg. Pete Lyons.
Yeah.
So
We have to say a little bit about Trans Am here. Okay. Because we've gone to John and Trans Am. Tommy Greasy's here. I mean, he could give us, because he's a driver, and even though he wasn't in that period, but to me, of that early period, I think 1970 would be the year for me. Because you had the Chaparral Camaros, you had Posey with the Challengers, you had Dan with the Barracudas, you had the Mustangs, obviously, and there were others. And it was just that one bright, shining moment. It was just amazing. How about you, Tommy?
Well, I think this year is going to be the best year. I'm still running in it.
Well, the Trans Am, let's not forget about this year, or Scott Pruitt, or Tommy Kendall, or Willie T, on and on and on. I mean, the Trans Am has been a strong series. When Hurley was driving the Audi that they regulated in the middle of the season because they had a competitive advantage and they just sat on them, which was wrong, but whatever, we know how that goes. Yeah, the Trans Am's had an incredible history.
Yeah, I think when I look at all the years, I love '69. I love the model, the looks of those cars. But when '70 came around, I don't know if this is a true story, but I heard that Penske, who had won 2 championships in a row for Chevrolet, he waited till the very, very last minute to tell Chevrolet that he was going to be working for AMC. And so it gave Jim the least amount of time possible to put these cars together. and I think it was something like 4 months. Something crazy. Oh, John the Lord. Okay. All right. All right. Well, in 4 months, he was able to put a car together that finished fourth in the championship, won races, had multiple podiums, and first of all, I'd like to say I am honored to be here with my heroes. And if you were to tell me when I was in the back of the black and white on Mulholland, so they'd scare me, so I wouldn't want to go fast on Mulholland anymore. They didn't put the cuffs on me, but they did put me in the car for quite a while. And I would be sitting here with you all. I'm just, Chris, he's been a mentor to me. He suspended me for 13 months. And it wasn't just the United States, it was worldwide or something like that. So, I look at the Trans Am series and I'm so honored to be a part of it. And for me to be the custodian of your dad's car, I'm just so proud of it. And it's just the best looking car. The 70s were amazing. You had Rufus, you had George Fulmer, I mean, all these characters that to this day is why we're lured to it and we feel so proud. Even Pruitt, the greats, Tommy Kendall, they look back at all of you all and just proud to be here. Thanks for having me.
That 1970, the last race at Riverside, with Parnelli with the caved inside on the car. That photo, I think the guy's name was Bob, the photographer. To me, as a photographer, I look at that and I go, I think that's one of the best pictures I ever shot, where he's coming around the corner, the car's hopping up, the sides caved in. It's where, as I remember, Parnelli ended up at the back of the field, came back to win the race, and won the championship. It was just one of those epic days. And a lot of people thought, maybe some people in the room here, that George and Parnelli didn't get along. They were bitter enemies. But the fact of the matter is they got along great. They were skiing on the weekends together, out on the lake, having barbecues together. But when it came to the race, they both were fierce competitors and they wouldn't give anybody an inch. But off the track, the best of buddies up until the day that Parnelli died. And which tells you they're real pros.
Yeah, one more thing I wanted to say.
Here, he's got to hang on a minute here. Donnie, hang on.
I took some great video because Simon Gray, Peter's son, is going to be racing with me this year. So I took some great video just now, and he's going to love that.
I've got a picture of John coming up the back side of Laguna Seca, which is so different than the way it is today. And you basically take your camping gear, Pete, right? You go up the back side there on the back side going to the corkscrew. And there's a shot, him coming up the hill, and there's a Volvo. Remember that Volvo that ran in the series? And you show that to people and go, Volvo race car? And I mean, it's not a swoopy looking Volvo, it's that big, bubbly, square, whatever model that is. I'm not a Volvo guy. But anyway, yeah, it was amazing. All right, let's see.
I've got two quick stories.
Yeah.
1970, the Mission Bell 250 here at Riverside was Dan Gurney's last race. He retired. And I was fortunate that my dad got invited to the retirement party that he had. And they had a big cake for him. And I went up and he says, "Kid, want a piece of cake?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he cut out number 48 on the door. "Here, you deserve this." And it was just a magical moment for me. And one of the strange things about me is I like collecting trophies, original trophies. So about 6 years ago, I went on a mission to find the CanAm trophy. You've seen it, Jim Hall pictures with it. It was designed in 1965 by this Argentine designer, and it was a satellite that hovered. 1965, this thing hovered. and it was so cool. And I couldn't find it anywhere. And I'm talking to Doug Nye one time, and Doug says, well, who had it last? And I said, well, the last anybody remembers is John Surtees had the trophy. So he says, well, I'm friends with John's wife. I'll call her and ask her. And she tells Doug Nye. Doug Nye is a pretty famous journalist and author in England. And Mrs. Surtees says, you know, that was John's favorite trophy. And she said, to this day, it's sitting on his desk. And I'm like, oh my God. And Doug called me up and he says, I found it. And I said, can you ask her if I can have it? And I wanted it to come here for this event. So then, once I knew where it was, I moved on to the Mission Bell trophy. Nobody had heard about it, nobody had seen it, nobody knew what it was. So I have a meeting here at the Mission Inn, and I came out a week early just to go over the hotel because I had spent so much time here growing up. I wanted to see what the hotel was like. And I hadn't said anything to anybody. I walk in the lobby, and I turn, and what's sitting in the lobby in a glass case? The Mission Bell trophy. And in my subtle way of doing things, I am losing it and just freaking out. And there's 5 people at the lobby desk, and I asked each one of them, do they know what that is? And no, we don't have a clue what this is. And I said, come over here and read the plaque. And it talks about it. It was given away 5 times, and it has to be displayed permanently in the lobby here, and it's in this big glass case. And it's massive. And we've got a picture outside that has Horst Queck that won it the first time in '66, and then Mark Donahue won it in '67, and they're holding the trophy. And I'm like, man, these guys were really stoked, because this thing, you see it in the lobby when you leave here, you walk right past it. It's huge.
Actually, Chris, I'm happy to say that's in the silent auction tonight.
And then Jerry Titus and my dad they were really close. Jerry drove for us several times. And Don Spencer, who took care of our cars, he worked for Jerry one winter, and Jerry was trying to get an advantage. So Don says, I got this figured out. Just leave me alone. Don cut off both sides of the Firebird. Jerry walked in, and there's no side of the car. And Jerry's like, Jesus, what did you do to my car? And Don says, just leave me alone. And he put a 2-inch wedge back in the car and welded the fenders, the whole side of the car back on. So the car ended up as 4 inches wider with this wider track and tires, and you couldn't tell. It was like some of the things that Penske had done, got the car too light. Well, let's just put a Lando roof on it. It's amazing.
We talked about Don Spencer. He was like a dad to you.
Yes.
And his hot rod is like a Seminole hot rod, the Don Spencer hot rod, the 32. It's like, and here's this guy, road racer. So many of these guys from that era were hot rodders. Dan Gurney, Phil Hill, Phil Remington was a member of the club over in Santa Monica.
It's interesting. A lot of them came through Flying Tigers, which was Air Force division during the Korean War, and these guys all kind of apprenticed and learned their skills at Flying Tigers.
Don also ran the Cook Woods program.
Yep.
Yeah, later. And of course, Roy Woods took over that Penske Javelin program.
And that will be here tomorrow as well.
Yeah. Roy was a great guy. I'll tell you an interesting story, because this is a room full of car collectors. Now, just imagine, we knew Roy really well. My dad and Roy got along great. And, his dad owned a trucking company that hauled cars, Woods Trucking, for hauling new cars. And so the story goes that his dad gave him so much money to make it racing, and if he didn't make it, Roy, you coming on home. So, you know, Roy Woods Racing was like one of the first of the big time teams. They had a Formula 5000 team, they had Carling Black Label, they had Hobbs. That was Tony Davitz in the Formula 5000 car. David Hobbs in the CanAm car. They had the Indy car. I mean, they had it going, Roy did. Well, anyway, comes the day he's going to shut it down. He has a McLaren Indy car, an Eagle Indy car. I think it was like a 73 or 4 Eagle. The 5000 Lola, the 332, the good chassis. And I forget which Can-Am car, and he had a Ferrari Daytona. That was his personal car. And he wanted to sell everything. So he calls my dad, says, make me an offer. And my dad says, what do you think, Dad? I'm a young guy. Steve didn't have the historic races at that time. None of that existed. And I go, Dad, I had a bunch of old race cars. What are we going to do with them? And I mean, I'm not the only guy that's done this, come on. And literally, it was like, I mean, it's just a bunch of metal now. I mean, and we didn't have room to boot, but anyway, just one of those, what got away. Alan, I have a question for you. Okay, we're still trying to figure out how many horsepower that is. Now, I know, I want to know a little bit more about the 917, because I've talked to you about this. The 962 motors, 1 year at the Rolex 24, AJ had a 3.3, and I think Holbert had a 2.7. And yeah, something like that. And I know when the 6-cylinder motors run out, you don't work for the factory anymore, do you? Or do you?
No, I never heard of it.
Okay, all right. So one of the things is every pit stop, there's a certain amount of oil that goes into those motors because they're air cooled. So how much oil they're burning gives you guys the indication of where we're at, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So did the Can-Am, were the races not long enough that was an issue, or?
No, in the Can-Am we didn't have any problems with oil consumption.
Okay.
But in 962 definitely it took us a long time to get the right ring combination and cylinder combination, but we even blew up engines. But that was, at the time, you know, the development, it wasn't like a factory development. What Endal, actually, our company, what we did is we took a 962 engine. It was basically very nice, but look in Europe. You know, in Europe they had a fuel consumption, they had 100 liters for a race, not more. And when the cars came over here, we didn't have any problems with fuel, so what we needed was torque and go. And therefore, we actually, I always told the guys in Weissach, you know, we don't improve the engine, we just adapt it to the American racetracks. And that's what we did. And pretty successfully in the 1980s.
So would Bosch's 917 motors be exactly the same as the Penske 917 motors?
To a certain degree, yes. To small things, maybe that, you know, like, you have to remember, and later on we did that NWF with Holbert in the 962 days, the factory is always improving stuff. But you have customers, because the 917, we had like 7 teams. So how are you going to do that? You know, the development is always with the car, and that's what the factory did. But once it was there, it was Penske. But once it was solid and it was good, the customers always could buy it.
So was Boschik, to put it one way, very frugal man?
He was clever. He was frugal and clever. Because that's a very good story too. When we went into CanAm racing, I did the engines by myself in the beginning. And a 12-cylinder engine, you have no idea how many bolts and nuts are, that's it. But what happened is, you know, like, he would always bring parts from Germany, like used parts. So what happened, we had a deal with Weissach at that time, where he would get the parts from the race engines, what Porsche actually said, there's so many hours, and we replaced the engine parts because they didn't want to blow it up. So that's some stuff that we actually installed then in our engines. So he, you know, was really frugal. He was clever, took chances, and that's all what I had. So I never, in my 3 years, ever installed new parts in a 917. That was Mr. Pollock.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And Schechter ran really good in that one car.
Yeah, but you know, like you have to remember, in the 1971 we had Milt Winter. And Milt, I don't know if you guys ever met him or something. Milt was just a given, you know, like he was a...
Yeah, Milt Minter.
Milt Winter. He was absolutely, you know, you could put him in any car. He didn't need any major adjustments or what, he was just fast and easy. And then when Schechter came in, see, he was already kind of semi-professional because he ran a 5000. He was already in Formula One, some races. And when he came in, it was actually too much for us because, you know, our team, it was myself, and it was a mechanic, 2 mechanics at that time, and Mr. Pollock would come on Friday evening, he on Sunday night. So it was just too much. So we had a good 73, but we blew up a couple of engines. So overall, I tell you, by the end of the season, I was glad that it was over.
Yeah, because you were right there. You were in that program.
Yeah,
There's some great
I ran the program.
Right, there's great pictures of you and Milt. In Ohio, I think, next to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. No, well, Milt and I did in 1971. You know, we had a flatbed. I don't know if you guys know that, where you put the car in the back.
Yeah, ramp truck.
And we had a motorhome. So Milt drove the motorhome, I drove the flatbed. That was all. That was the team. And you know, like in 1972, what I'm very proud of, we finished second in the series. It was Milt again. And then in 1973, Schechter came. Wonderful years, I tell you that.
All right, that's amazing.